this is Summer Lynn from Chicago, Illinois. Just wanted to give a huge shout out to the Relay for all the love and support they've given my team and I. And make sure you stay tuned for all the latest boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. To no one's surprise, DAZN have reportedly decided that they won't approve Canelo versus Yildirim. The fight was ordered by the WBC for their vacant super middleweight title, but it's claimed DAZN want a better match and would approve Callum Smith, according to BoxingScene.com. Mike Kopinger tweeted, reported on yesterday's pod, DAZN is trying to cut Canelo's purse in half from his $35 million guarantee for his next bout, since it's not Triple G, leading to a stalemate and concern boxing's top star might not fight in 2020. This comes as a surprise to no one, okay? DAZN, a couple of weeks ago, gave a short list of guys who they wouldn't approve for Canelo Alvarez's very next fight, and those guys were much better opponent options than Yildirim. I'd rather see Canelo in there with John Ryder or even David Lemieux than Yildirim.
They're not going to pay you $35 million to fight that fucking guy.
That's the thing. The Canelo Alvarez people don't seem to want to take any kind of a pay cut whilst simultaneously pursuing the cheapest opponent option for them. An option so cheap that there's hardly any interest, if any interest at all, in seeing the fight. I mean, who the hell wants to see Canelo Alvarez versus Yildirim?
Not me.
Let's be reasonable here. If that's the kind of guy that you're looking to fight, you can't honestly expect DAZN to pay you $35 million fucking dollars for that. Now, Canelo Alvarez has enough money that he's probably not strapped for cash like everyone else. You know, Canelo Alvarez, in all likelihood, is probably still spending Golovkin money and Daniel Jacobs money.
He can afford to hold out.
But if you want to have a fight this year, and you want it to be against the likes of an Yildirim, okay, you're going to have to take a pay cut. You can't expect the people at DAZN to pay you $35 million for that. It's not happening. You got Billy Joe Saunders on that side of the street. You got Callum Smith on that side of the street. That's what you got. And those are more interesting opponent options by far and wide than Yildirim. Hell, if Canelo Alvarez goes with Callum Smith, maybe they could turn that into a unification match. Maybe they could convince the WBC to go back on their previous ruling
That was in favor of Canelo versus Yildirim.
and re-rule on Canelo versus Smith for what is the vacant WBC title. We all know that Canelo Alvarez takes precedence ahead of everyone with the WBC, and we also know that Callum Smith is the WBC's Diamond Champion.
Let those two fucking guys fight for the vacant title.
Yildirim hasn't had a fight in over a year, you understand. He hasn't had a fight since February of 2019. But he's coming off a loss to Anthony Durrell, so why should Yildirim be a sticking point in any way, shape, or form as far as who gets to fight for the vacant WBC title? In other words, Yildirim shouldn't stand in the way of Canelo Alvarez and Callum Smith fighting for that belt. It makes more sense that they fight for it than Avni.
This guy's quasi-retired.
I never had too much stock in that news that broke earlier this week of Canelo requesting to fight Yildirim. I wasn't sure that fight would materialize because I wasn't sure that DAZN would approve it.
Just doesn't make sense.
You know what? If Canelo Alvarez wants to stick to his guns and he's determined to not take a pay cut, let the fucking guy sit out the rest of 2020 and he don't fight nobody. You know, whatever. And then what you do is you have Callum Smith fight Yildirim for that vacant WBC title. They weren't going to do a goddamn fucking thing with it on the PBC side of things. They were going to have David defend it against Romer Angulo before David blew the weight, and afterwards the plan was to have David fight Yildirim in defense of it. They weren't going to unify it. Stand a better chance of involving that green belt in a unification match if the belt is in possession of someone on the DAZN matchroom side of things. So I stand by my original assertion that Eddie Hearn needs to see if he can capitalize off of this situation, use it to his advantage. That DAZN has decided they're not going to approve a Canelo Alvarez versus Yildirim fight, but it is Avni holds the mandatory challenger position for that green belt. He's the one with the shot. You can finagle a situation that sees Callum Smith fight that fucking guy for that fucking belt. You know what? If Callum's being a hardliner, maybe he's got a problem with the situation, whatever. Then you get Daniel Jacobs to fight Yildirim for that same fucking belt. Because Daniel Jacobs just so happens to be ranked in the WBC's top 10 ranked standings. I'm sure they can finagle a situation and grease the wheels that gets that ball rolling. As much as the WBC would like to capitalize off of Canelo Alvarez's very next fight, it's all for nothing if DAZN doesn't approve his opponent.
They don't approve of Avni.
If they don't approve of Avni, Canelo doesn't get paid. If Canelo doesn't get paid, you don't get your sanctioning fees.
So you gotta move on.
You order Canelo-Yildirim versus Callum Smith for the vacant WBC title, and that's your best bet to get some sanctioning fees. And while I myself, more often than not, am not in favor of the WBC's money-hungry tactics and the endless pursuit of sanctioning fees, I would rather that green belt end up on the Matchroom DAZN side of things, where it stands the best chance of being unified, than having that belt go back to the PBC, where they're just going to hold it hostage and over-marinate fights.
Just no fucking reason they shouldn't have made that Caleb Plant fight already.
I reiterate, the plan was to have David defend the title against Romer Angulo, then defend it again against Canelo-Yildirim.
Wasn't gonna unify it yet.
In any event, let's see what happens. Moving on. I'm sure that most of you have heard by now that the trainer to Terence Crawford, Brian Bomac McIntyre, has released information he was privy to in reference to Keith Thurman's asking price for a Terence Crawford fight. Get this. Keith Thurman wanted $10 million up front to fight Terence Crawford. $10 million, that's more than the reported $2.5 million he was guaranteed to fight Manny Pacquiao. I find it peculiar that Keith Thurman's asking price would be
that much?
Approximately 5 times more than what he was reportedly guaranteed to fight a bigger name in Manny. Why would you expect to get $10 million up front to fight Terence? Brian McIntyre was quoted as saying, "See, if he, Thurman, wanted to fight, he'd have Al Heyman send the contract to Top Rank with a boatload of money. But guess what? He doesn't have a promoter to put up the money because Al Heyman isn't putting up shit. Now you've got people talking shit about Bud not fighting Thurman. Sit down somewhere. Crawford haters are mad." That is a very compelling angle. I mean, Al Heyman has this reputation for being such a mover and such a shaker, yet time and time again, it seems that his fighters are relying on other promoters, other outfits to put up big cash, big money.
Yeah?
When they offered Jermall Charlo something to the tune of $7 million to fight Demetrius Andrade, that wasn't enough for Jermall apparently, but we never saw Al Heyman and the PBC send a counter offer to Demetrius Andrade. Now did we? $7 million is not enough to get one of your boys to cross the street. What are you willing to put up to have one of our boys cross the street?
Nothing.
We never found out because there was no counteroffer. Something very similar is true in the case of Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. That failed set of negotiations. $100 million from DAZN was not enough for Wilder to get on board to fight Anthony Joshua. That wasn't enough money.
Okay, then what's your counteroffer?
If us putting up $100 million for your guy ain't enough money for your guy, then what are you guys willing to put up for our guy? Once again, we never found out because there was no counter offer. It was slightly different with Gervonta Davis and Tevin Farmer, the then IBF super featherweight champion. At that time, DAZN was willing to put up something to the tune of $7, maybe $8 million for Gervonta to cross the street, and the people over there at TMT, PBC, they sent a counter offer, but that counter offer was for less money up front than what Matchroom was willing to put up. In that situation, Eddie Hearn actually proposed that both parties, both outfits, put up a blind bid and whoever puts up the most money wins. And, people at TMT, the PBC, they weren't receptive to this idea. They didn't want to know, I guess. And that's one of the few times, if not the only time, they sent anybody a counteroffer of any kind. And that offer, I reiterate, was for less money than the other side was willing to put up. So we look at Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman, who, at least reportedly, is asking for $10 million up front to fight Terence Crawford. When it comes to the reported numbers, fight prices and pay-per-view buys, the numbers that are reported aren't necessarily gospel. Think of them as ballpark figures. In the neighborhood of what the fighter might have got, or in the neighborhood of what a pay-per-view may have done.
Oh, it's not exact science.
It's a ballpark figure, you understand. It's a ballpark figure as far as what the fighter got. It's in the neighborhood of what the fighter got. And the ballpark figure for what Manny Pacquiao got for that Keith Thurman fight is anywhere between $10 million, $15 million to $20 million. Whereas the ballpark figure for Keith Thurman is much less than that. The most consistent number you'll find as far as what Keith Thurman got up front for that Pacquiao fight was a meager $2.5 million. Approximately 5 times less than what he wants up front for Terrence Crawford. Now, Forbes magazine, a very well-known periodical here in the United States, had a different number. They put Keith Thurman's take-home amount of money somewhere around $8 million. But that's the take-home amount, you understand. That's presumably with the guarantee and the pay-per-view upside.
That's not just the upfront money.
Whereas what we're talking about is the minimum amount of money the fighter stands to make for having the fight, whether there's an upside or not. It's conceivable that maybe Keith got a little more than $2.5 million. I could see a couple $100,000 extra, maybe even $1 million. Maybe it was
a little more.
$3.5 million guaranteed to Keith Thurman for that Pacquiao fight.
But it wasn't 10.
That's just it. If you didn't get $10 million up front, if you didn't get $10 million fucking dollars guaranteed to fight a bigger name than Crawford in Manny Pacquiao, then why on earth would you expect $10 million up front to fight Crawford here and now, during a pandemic, after a year on the couch, a year of inactivity, when you fucking lost, bro?
Yeah.
You fucking lost that Pacquiao fight. You fucking lost your world title. So you come back and ask for more money?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
If you didn't get $10 million up front, if you didn't get $10 million guaranteed to fight a bigger name in Manny Pacquiao, a so obviously bigger name in Manny Pacquiao, at a time where there wasn't a global pandemic going on, at a time where there actually was live gate revenue, if you didn't get $10 million then, when you were an undefeated champion, why the fuck would you expect anyone to give you that up front now?
You wouldn't.
For Terrence Crawford.
You wouldn't.
Put simply, you wouldn't. Making all of this a very haphazardly orchestrated bluff. It's for this reason in my previous video, I questioned what exactly was Keith Thurman looking for? What kind of money did he go to Top Rank looking to get? Of course, based on whatever that number is, that'll tell you whether or not this guy was being serious or not. That'll tell you whether or not this guy meant business. And based on this number, this guy's out of his fucking mind.
Or he's bluffing.
You weren't actually expecting them to give you that. I'll tell you what you did. You wanted to make it look like you wanted to fight, so you go over there asking for something you know you're not gonna get. And when you don't get it, you'll claim that you were ducked. When in all actuality, nobody's gonna guarantee Keith Thurman $10 million up front.
Think he's gonna get that for his next fight?
Nobody's gonna guarantee him that. Not Top Rank, not over there at the PBC. Nobody is going to give Keith Thurman $10 million up front. Not during a pandemic. He didn't get $10 million up front when there wasn't a pandemic, but he's expecting to when there is? No, of course not. He asked for something he knew he wasn't likely to get, so that when he didn't get it, he could claim he was being ducked.
Shyster tactics.
At some point, you've got to use your own common sense. Here you have Keith Thurman asking for something that you know he's not likely to get, at a time when he hasn't had a fight in a year, over a year. He's got no belt, no world title, and he's coming off a loss. Asking for an amount of money you and I both know he's not likely to get. Does this give you the impression he was serious about Terrence Crawford?
You think he really wanted that fight?
You think this guy was being serious? Asking for $10 million up front, after a year of inactivity, no belt, no world title, coming off a loss. You think that Keith Thurman would even go into a Terrence Crawford fight under those circumstances? No, of course not.
This was all just a bluff, like I said.
And finally, Tyson Fury tweeted very recently, "Bronze Bomber, where you at, Mush? The clock is ticking. I'm not going to wait forever. There's other bums in the division that I want to eat for breakfast." And in reading this, you kind of get the sense that, I don't know, Tyson Fury's trying to imply that Wilder and his team are dragging their feet.
But he's waiting on them.
That if this fight is tentatively scheduled to go down either late this year or early next year, it's as a result of the Wilder side of things? I don't know. I don't know how much I can read into that. I don't know how much stock I can have in things that Tyson Fury says, because Tyson Fury does say quite a bit.
He goes back on it quite a bit.
The truth is that The Wilder people might feel so inclined to wait until live audiences can attend fights again, just as much as the top-ranked people are waiting for that. You know, it's not like the top-ranked people are in some kind of hurry to make this thing. They are just as invested in this fight as the PBC guys are. And they both want live audiences to return to boxing matches because, well, this ain't the kind of fight you can stage behind closed doors.
Not if you want to make as much money as you can.
It's precisely these kinds of fights involving these kinds of fighters that we haven't seen yet. The bigger names, you know, the Tyson Furys, the Anthony Joshuas, the Deontay Wilders, to a lesser extent, the Canelo Alvarezes. The big marquee names are the names we're waiting for here and now. There are fights going on. There are cards being staged. There are.
Some of them are pretty fucking good.
But it's the bigger names, the biggest of the biggest names, that we're still waiting for. If Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 is tentatively scheduled at this point, it's for obvious reasons. And those reasons are so obvious that these comments from Tyson Fury read as hollow to me. It's not like I'm some Wilder apologist. Put simply, I can't stand the fucking guy. But if we're gonna be objective and we're gonna be honest, it's not like Tyson Fury's waiting for Wilder specifically, to have this third fight. Both the Top Rank and PBC side of things are waiting for audiences to come back, and until they do, this fight isn't likely to happen. They're not going to sacrifice the potential live gate revenue that this fight could make when it did good numbers, really good numbers, the last time. Something to the tune of $16.9 million. And you'd have to be born yesterday to think that both Top Rank and the PBC are going to sacrifice anything comparable to that amount of money so that they can stage this fight sooner than later? Behind closed doors?
Yeah, that's a last resort.
There are certain questions to be asked in reference to this situation. I mean, is there a statute of limitations, a time frame, a expiration date on the existing contract signed by both Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder that allows the loser of the fight to exercise a rematch clause? When, if ever, does that contract expire? And will it expire before this fight comes off?
I don't know.
But it is taking a mighty long time to get this thing ironed out, to get this thing sorted.
You know what? It might not happen.
And I'm not being pessimistic for the sake of pessimism, but if what these guys are waiting for is for audiences to come back, we really don't know when that is. That could be a long time from now. That could be as long as next year.
Is this contract still valid through next year?
Only both the aforementioned parties know the answer to that question.